This is the discussion of this 2020 A-level Economics MCQ paper. Question 1. A free good has which one of the following characteristics? So these are very easy because by now we have discussed several similar questions. So what are the main qualities of these free goods? If not, what are the main qualities of non-economic goods? The main quality of non-economic goods is that there's no scarcity related to these goods, right? No scarcity. And as a result of having no scarcity, the problem of choice does not arise. So we can write no problem of choice. There's no problem of choice related to these non-economic goods. And if there's no problem of choice, then there's no opportunity cost, because if there's no problem of choice, you don't need to make choices, so that you don't need to make sacrifices. And if you don't sacrifice, then there's no opportunity cost, right? There's no opportunity cost. So these are the main qualities of non-economic goods. And if you know these, you will be able to recognize the answer for this question 1. It says it has some degree of scarcity in relation to, see that now there's no scarcity, but this first one says it has some degree of scarcity, which is totally wrong. And the second one, it has no opportunity cost in supply, because supply is decided by nature and there's no scarcity. So there's no problem of choice. If so, then there's no opportunity cost as well. So this is a characteristic of free goods. The third one, its consumption or production does not generate any externality. See, this is not a criteria that we use to classify goods as free goods or economic goods. So this is irrelevant for this given question. And the fourth one says, it is supplied by the government free of charge. No, it is supplied by the nature. And the fifth one, again it says it is supplied by the government. Again, totally wrong. It is supplied by the nature. Look at this second question now. Economists refer the term capital exclusively to, okay, so if you need to recognize something to be a part of capital, there must be two main qualities of that given resource. And what are those two qualities? On one side, this given resource has to be man-made, right? It has to be, on one side, it has to be man-made. And secondly, this must be used directly in the production process. So let me write used directly in the production process. If not, that same idea we can just recognize as being a productive resource, right? This has to be a productive resource. So when I say productive resource, it simply means the ability of using directly in the production process. So if these two qualities are there in the given resource, you can classify that as a part of capital. So the first one says human-made, of course, man-made goods, which are used to produce other goods and services. 100% true. See, which are used to produce other goods and services means which are used directly to produce other goods and services, and they are man-made. So this given option talks about the both qualities that must be there in capital goods. So this is true. Second one, capital refers exclusively to money used to purchase capital in the form of, see, money is not a part of capital. The reason, money is not a productive resource. If not, in other words, you can't use money directly in the production process. So money is not a part of capital. Again, savings, which is not a part of capital, but the process of generating this capital we recognize as investment, and the source of investment we recognize as savings, but somehow savings is not identical to capital. And the fourth one, money used to, see that now again capital is not money. Real estate, forest, metals, and mineral resources. See, look at this. Forest and mineral resources. These are natural resources. If these are natural resources, they are not man-made, so that we can't recognize these to be capital goods. So this is also not the answer there. Right. Look at this question 3 now. This says, what is meant by the statement every economic system faces the problem of scarcity. Okay, so simply if every economic system faces the problem of scarcity, what does that mean? In that any given economic system, human wants, right? Human wants are unlimited, and at the same time, the available resources are limited. Available resources are limited. So due to these two qualities, wants being unlimited and resources being limited, every economy faces the problem of scarcity. And that's all we know. And right, so based on that, we'll try to select the correct option for this given question 3. First one says, the quantities available of some resources in the society exceeds the demand for them. See, it talks about some resources, and also it makes a comparison between the availability of resources and the demand. But when you really recognize this problem of scarcity, those are not the two variables that you compare. You don't compare demand with something else. You only compare wants with the resources, available resources. එතකොට එතන යන comparison එකක් වැරදි සහ අනිත් පැත්තෙන් some resources කියලා කිව්වම ඒකත් වැරදි. So there are two problems related to this given statement, so that's wrong there. Second one says mineral deposits are available only in finite amounts in a country. See that now? It's not, I mean, scarcity is not something just related to mineral deposits, right? That is related to all the available resources. So this is also wrong there. Third one says countries have failed to achieve full employment due to scarcity of resources. No, even under scarcity of resources, the economies, I mean the countries can achieve full employment. So that is not a problem to achieve full employment. So this is also wrong then. Fourth one, productive resources are not sufficient to satisfy all wants of the society. See that now? That is 100% true, and that's exactly what we discussed here. So this statement compares the availability of resources and the amount of wants that we have in the society. So that insufficiency of resources compared to wants we recognize as scarcity. So that is the true statement there. The fifth one, economic systems have cyclically recurring expansionary phases during which scarcity of resources occurs. So there's no meaning in this one. The reason is, if you just look at this business cycle, right? If you look at the business cycle, we say that we mainly have 4 phases in a business cycle, and this problem, I mean scarcity, is something that is common to any given phase. එහෙම නැතුව මේක expansionary phase එකේ විතරක් තියෙන එහෙම ප්‍රශ්නයක් නෙමෙයි. So scarcity is common to any given phase in the business cycle. So this is also then wrong. Right, we'll move to this fourth question. This says allocatively efficient point on a production possibilities curve is achieved. See that now? There are different ways of defining this allocative efficiency. One way is that is a situation where the economy utilizes the resources to produce the most preferred combination of goods by the society. So that is just one way of defining this allocative efficiency, right? That's a situation where the economy utilizes resources to produce the most preferred combination of goods. So that's just one way. And the other method of defining this allocative efficiency is that's a situation where the economy produces at a point where marginal benefit becomes equal to the marginal cost. And in some papers, this is mentioned as, I mean, the marginal benefit we consider as price. So even if price is equal to marginal cost, we still say that in this given situation, the economy has achieved allocative efficiency, right? So these are the two main ways of defining this thing. So if you know this, you will be able to find the answer for this given question 4. Right, the first one says, the minimum quantity of inputs are used to produce each good. So this is what we recognize as productive. efficiency, not allocative efficiency. Second one, each good is produced at a level where marginal benefits equal marginal cost. And that's what I explained here. Marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. So that is the correct answer for this question 4. But we will go through the other options. Large amounts of capital goods are produced relative to consumer goods. Okay, that's the third one. And the fourth one says large amount of consumer goods are produced relative to capital goods. See, we don't know. I mean, we can't, just by looking at these two sentences, we can't decide whether this is the most preferred combination of goods by that given society. If it is so, we could have taken one of these to be the answer. But based on the available data, we can't decide whether this is the most preferred combination of goods. Clear? So that's why we can't select any of these. The fifth one, each good is produced at a level where price of the good exceeds marginal benefit. So if price exceeds the marginal benefit, then marginal benefit will not be equal to the marginal cost, then that will not be equal to the marginal cost as well. So there's no meaning in this thing. And the answer is the second one. The fifth question, this says the law of demand states that, okay, so this is something very simple. So the law of demand states that during a given period of time, right, during a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, there's a negative relationship, right? There's a negative relationship between, so this is really important, there's a negative relationship between price and the quantity demanded. So this negative relationship that exists between P and QD, when other factors remain constant during a given period of time, we recognize as the law of demand, right? This is what we recognize as law of demand, right? So if you have this idea in mind, you can select the correct answer. Look at the first one. It says a decrease in the price of a good shifts the demand curve to the leftward. See that now? I told you that this law of demand talks about the two variables, price and the quantity demanded. So when quantity demanded changes, see, on this axis we represent the quantity demanded and on this axis we represent the price. So when this QD changes as a result of changing this P, what happens to the demand curve? Now, for example, just assume that the price increases. When the price increases from, let's say, P1 to P2, this is P1 and this is P2. So price increases from P1 to P2. And then what happens to QD? See, QD decreases from, let's say, QD1 to QD2. QD decreases. And then what happened to the demand curve? Nothing happened, right? Nothing happened. So that's why this statement is wrong. A decrease in the price of a good. Okay, imagine that the opposite happens here. A decrease happens in the price, then the point on the demand curve moves downwards and that's it. And nothing will happen to the demand curve. So there will not be a shift of the demand curve. So that's wrong then. Second one, law of demand states that when other things remain same, okay, yes, when other factors remain constant, the higher the price of a good, okay, higher the price of the good, the lower the quantity demanded, lower the quantity demanded. See, when one variable increases, the other variable has decreased, which means there is a negative relationship between P and QD. So yes, it's true. Then answer for this question 5 has to be the second one. But look at the third one. When other things remain the same, higher the price of the good. Okay, once again, higher the price of the good. Wait. Higher the price of the good, the higher is the quantity demanded. No, then if one variable increases, even the other increases, then there's no negative relationship, then there has to be a positive relationship. But the law of demand always tells us that there is a negative relationship between these two. So then this third one has to be wrong because it's simply the opposite of the second one. So if the second one is true, third one has to be false there. Fourth one, a decrease in the price of a good shifts the demand curve of the good rightward, which is not acceptable. So that's the same thing that we discussed in the first option. So nothing will happen to the demand curve. There will not be any rightward or a leftward shift in the demand curve. The fifth one, an increase in the price of a good shifts the demand curve. Again, no, there's no any shift of the demand curve. So the answer for this question 5 is the second. Right, now look at this question 6. In question 6, it says the quantity demanded of a good is. Okay. First one says the amount of a good that consumers plan to purchase at a particular price. Okay. So if you remember the theory classes, the things that we discussed in the theory classes, the very first thing that I mentioned on the day that we started this lesson theory of demand is the difference between the demand and the quantity demanded. So for example, if you look at this table with P and QD columns, let me just put some values here. Let's say this is 0, 10, 20, and then 30. And on this side, we have 300, 200, 100, and then 0. Just assume that these are the values we receive. Okay, now what if I ask this question? What is demand? Now the question is with regard to quantity demanded, but just tell me what is demand. Demand is this. Look at this one. We say during a given period of time, right? During a given period of time, when other factors remain constant, look at the most important part that I'm going to write here. Various quantities that consumers are able to buy and have the ability to buy at various prices available for a good in the market is known as the demand. So this entire thing is the definition of demand. So what's it once again? During a given period of time when other factors remain constant, the most important part, various quantities that the consumers are able to buy and have the ability to buy at various prices we recognize as demand, right? So that if I ask the question, what does this table represent to you? What does this entire table represent to you? The entire table represents demand. How do we know that? Because the entire table aligns with the definition of demand. If you look at the table, what do we see? You see various quantities that the consumers are able to buy and have the ability to buy at various prices. So since this entire table presents us various quantities at various prices, we say that this entire table presents demand. And how do we define this thing? Quantity demanded, how do we define that? If it's the quantity demanded, right? So let me take this thing. I will change it accordingly. So let me take it and change it in this way. If it's about the quantity demanded, right? So let me write. Now this is about the quantity demanded. So if it's about the quantity demanded, this is what we say. This is how we define it. So let me erase these two. Now we say during a given period of time when other factors remain constant, we say a specific quantity that the consumers are able to buy and have the ability to buy at a specific price. We recognize as the quantity demanded. So let me highlight the important words here. See, this is the difference between demand and the quantity demanded. When it comes to the demand, the things are in plural. I mean, it's about various quantities at various prices. But if it's about the quantity demanded, it's a specific quantity at a specific price. Hope you understand that. So that earlier I asked the question, what does this whole table represent to you? So the answer is the whole table represents different quantities at different prices, if not demand. But if you just pick one value that comes inside this column, what does that value represent? That is the specific quantity that the consumer is willing and have the ability to buy at the price rupees 20. At this specific price 20, the consumer is willing to buy and the consumer has the ability to buy 100, and that 100 we recognize as the quantity demanded. So that's the difference between the two. Okay, so if you know this difference, just come to this question 6 and read this first option given. It says the amount of a good that consumers plan to purchase at a particular price. The amount, one specific amount of the good that the consumers plan to purchase. Now, there's a slight difference between the previous explanation that I had with you with this given one. So here they don't talk about the ability to buy and the willingness to buy. Instead, they have given consumers plan to purchase. See that now, if these two get combined, I mean the ability to buy and willingness to buy, right? So I have written the same things. It's a mistake. So on this side, the consumers are willing to buy and have the ability to buy, right? So on this side, it has to be willing to buy, and even here it has to be willing to buy. So somehow, when these two get combined, the willingness and the ability, there's always a plan to buy, right? Willingness and the ability. There's always a plan to buy. එනිසා අපිට මේ වචන දෙක තනිකට ගන්න පුළුවන් මේ plan to purchase කියන කතන්දරේ. So that the answer for this question 6 is the first one. Right. Look at this second option. It says the quantity demanded of a good is independent of the price. No, the quantity demanded is always related to a specific price, not that it is independent from the price, which is totally wrong there. The third one says independent of consumers' buying plans. No, the quantity demanded is again related to consumers' plan, නැත්නම් consumers' willingness and the ability to buy the good. That is not independent from the plan to buy. And then the fourth one says quantity demanded of a good is always equal to the equilibrium quantity. එහෙම වෙන්න බෑනේ. මොකද එහෙම වෙන්න බෑ කියන එක අපි දැනගන්නේ if this is just a demand curve, right? If this is a demand curve, so on this demand curve we get infinite number of quantities that are demanded. See, now you may say, no sir, we just have it from, let's say, 0 to 100. But if you just take this straight line which ranges from 0 to 100, right? On this straight line, how many QD values you really have? You have infinite number of values. And among these infinite number of values, only one will be the equilibrium quantity, right? That's the quantity where the expectations of suppliers become equal to the expectations of consumers. So one such value we can recognize to be the equilibrium quantity. Not all the given QD values are equal to equilibrium quantity. No, wrong. Then the fifth one, the amounts that the consumers are willing to buy at different prices. The problem with this statement 5 is these are in plural. This talks about the amounts in plural and at different prices again in plural. But if you remember the definition that we discussed here, it's always in singular. I mean, if it's a quantity demanded, it's in singular. A specific quantity available at a specific price. Right. So I hope that you understand this properly. We'll move to this seventh one now. Seventh one says, which of the following causes an increase in the quantity supplied of good X? See that now the question talks about the quantity supply. The quantity supplied can change only by change of the price of the considered good. If the considered good is X, right? When the price of this good X changes, the quantity supplied will change according to the law of supply. වෙන කිසිම දෙයකට බෑ QS ව වෙනස් කරන්න. හැබැයි තව සමහර දේවල් වලට පුළුවන් supply එක වෙනස් කරන්න. හැබැයි in this given question they don't talk about the supply, instead they talk about the quantity supplied. එනිසා price එක වෙනස් වුණොත් විතරමයි සහ if you need or if we need to see an increase in the quantity supplied වෙන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ තමයි according to the law of demand වෙන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ තමයි මොකද්ද? Price increase in the considered good. So when the price of the considered good increases, when other factors remain constant during a given period of time, even the quantity supplied will increase according to the law of supply. So if you know this simple thing, you can find the answer for this question 7. And what's the answer then? An increase in the price of good X while other things remain unchanged. Yes, an increase in price will increase the quantity supplied according to the law of supply. So this is true. So no point of discussing these points. But anyway, look at the second one. An increase in the price of good Y, which is a complement of complement in the production of good X. See, then the prices of the complementary goods will not change supply or maybe the quantity supply. That's totally irrelevant. The third one says an improvement in the technology for producing good X. So when the technology get improved, supply will increase, not the quantity supply. A reduction in the prices of resources. Once again, the production cost decreases. What get increased? Supply increases, not the quantity supply. So this is also wrong. Fifth one, a decrease in the demand for a substitute for good X. Okay, so this demand and supply, those are independent forces. If it's a market economy, they are independent forces. Then there's no connection between demand and the supply or the quantity supply. So you can simply ignore this fifth one as well. Right, now look at this eighth one. It says in a competitive market, if both demand and supply increase, what will be the effect on the equilibrium price and quantity? I think this is the third, if not the fourth time that we discuss this exact same question. දැන් ඔයා ඒවා බලලා මේක බලන්නේ නැත්තම් කියලා හිතලා මම ටග් ගාලා ඇඳලා පෙන්නනවා. හැබැයි ටග් ගාලා ඇඳලා පෙන්නනවා විතරයි ලොකු ඩිස්කෂන් එකක් කරන්නේ නැහැ සහ ලොකු ඩිස්කෂන් එකක් කරන්න ඕනෙත් නැහැ. කතන්දරේ මෙච්චරයි. So according to the question, both demand and supply increase. If so, what could happen? So let me first draw the initial diagrams. So this is the initial demand and this is the initial supply. So we have the demand and supply. Based on this demand and supply, let's recognize this to be the equilibrium price and this to be the equilibrium quantity. Okay, now let's see how this could change. I mean both demand and supply. Okay. අපි ටග් ගාලා ඇඳලා බලුවොත් එහෙම මේ වගේ තව එකක් ඕන, ඒ වගේ තවත් එකක් ඕන. Right? මේක හරියට කතා කරනවා we need 3 diagrams. Okay, in the first diagram, let me just take the demand increases significantly, but supply increases by a very small amount, right? Insignificantly. So that what will happen to the price? Price will increase, and what will happen to the quantity demanded? Quantity demanded will also increase. So price increases, QD, or the quantity, market quantity also increases. And then in the second one, let's say that the supply increases significantly, but not the demand. Demand increases slightly, right? Only slightly. Okay, then what has happened to the equilibrium price? See, the new equilibrium is here. Equilibrium price has decreased, and what has happened to the equilibrium quantity? That has increased. So price has increased, quantity has also, my mistake, price has decreased, quantity has increased. And then what if both demand and supply change in the same ratio, right? What if the two get increased in the same ratio? Shape එකේ මේක මෙහෙම පේනවා කියලා මම හිතනවා. So nothing happens to the price. Price remains same, but the quantity increases, right? Quantity increases. So this is enough. I mean, more than enough. See, what could happen to the price? The real answer is we don't know, right? It depends on the amount of change or the relative change of demand and supply. So without knowing the relative change, without knowing which one get increased more than the other one, we can't comment on the change in price. But one thing is 100% certain, and what's that? That's about the quantity, right? So doesn't matter which one increases relatively, I mean significantly, the quantity will always increase, but we don't know about the price. ඕක තමයි answer එක. We will try to find that. The price will definitely increase. No, wrong. Not definitely. The quantity will definitely increase, yes, but the price could either rise, fall, or remains the same. Yes, that's why we drew 3 diagrams. In the first one, the price got increased. In the second one, the price got decreased. But in the third one, the price remained the same. So the answer for this question 8 is the second one. So I think there's no point of discussing the other options. So we'll move to the ninth one. This says, suppose the market demand function for a given consumer good is presented by QD equals 500 minus 5P. What is the arc price elasticity of demand of this good over the price range 20 to 30? So this is nothing actually. So anyone can do this question, but wait, I'll show you this properly. So the arc PED is equal to, based on this given information, you can decide that the best equation to apply is this. So D into P1 plus P2 over QD1 plus QD2. But before we apply the values into this equation, we will quickly, in the exam, you don't need to do all these things step by step, but I'm just doing everything step by step so that you can learn this way, right? So that's the only reason. So let me take the price column and the quantity demanded column. So when the price is, initial price is 20. So when the price is 20, you can do the calculation and tell me QD. So how much is QD? So just replace this P with 20 and do the calculation for QD. 5 into 20 is 100. So 500 minus 100 will be 400. And then when the price get increased to 30, 30 into 5 is 150. So 500 minus 150 is how much? 350. And the value of B is here, that's minus 5. So you can take that as minus 5 into P1, the first value given for price, P2, the second value given for price, and then QD1 is 400, QD2 is 350. So look at this now. In the numerator we have 50 and in the denominator we get 750. So finally it's minus 250 over 750, which is equal to 1 over 3. Minus 1 over 3, right? So this is minus 0.33. And what's the answer there? The answer is, for this question 9, answer is second one. Right, look at this 10th one. Demonstrating their generosity at a time of national distress, okay, vegetable farmers in a country decide to sell as much as vegetables as consumers want to buy at half of the competitive market equilibrium price. And as a result of this action, okay, so this is what happens. This is the, let's say this is the equilibrium, right? So this is the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. And what happens in this given situation, the farmers make a decision to cut the price by half and to supply whatever the quantity that they, the consumers ask for, so that the price is half now. So they will supply this much of a quantity. And then if you look at the provided answers, in these answers, they just talk about the economic surplus, consumer surplus, and the producer surplus. See, this is a rule. At the equilibrium price, what get maximized? At the equilibrium price, economic surplus is maximized, right? At the equilibrium price, economic surplus is maximized. So at any price, may be above or may be below the equilibrium price, economic surplus will decrease. එනිසා මට ඇත්තට මේක පේනවා මෙතන. මොකද්ද කතන්දරේ? Economic surplus will fall. It doesn't matter how much generous the farmers are. If they reduce the price, the economic surplus will decrease. Right? Even if they increase the price for some reason, again the economic surplus will decrease. So same thing happens. Right? Enisa, obviously the answer for this question 10 is the first one, and that's something obvious. Okay, look at this 11th one. In the 11th one, what does it say? In the 11th one, it says if the income effect of a price change is negative, but the substitution effect dominates, then the good is. Okay, so this is the thing. I think we discussed this in 2019 paper or 2018 paper as well. I mean something similar to this, not this exact same thing. But if the income effect is negative, what does that mean? There's a negative relationship between real income and the demand, right? And the, let's say, quantity demanded. There's a negative relationship between the real income and the quantity demanded. So why is that? If there's a negative relationship between the real income and the quantity demanded, the good has to be an inferior good, right? The good has to be an inferior good. But the problem, these inferior goods we divide into two types. So let me write here, inferior goods are of two types. One I can just recognize to be typical inferior goods, typical inferior goods. The other one is given goods, right? The other one is given goods. But somehow in these papers, if they just say inferior goods, they always mean the typical inferior goods, not the given goods. මොකද ඒක එහෙමනම් ඒක වෙනමම කියනවා. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා ඔය papers වල කතන්දරයට ආවට පස්සේ if they just mention inferior, they are always referring to these typical inferior goods. ඒකත් එහෙම තමයි. හරි. එහෙනම් දැන් අපි දන්න එකම දේ මොකද්ද? If the income effect is negative, the good has to be inferior. එතකොට inferior කියලා කිව්වට පස්සේ theoretically one of these can be true. ඒ කියන්නේ the product could either be a typical inferior good, if not it could be a given good. එතකොට how do we differentiate between these two? අන්න මේ දෙකෙන් exactly මේක typical inferior ද නැත්නම් given good එකක්ද කියන එක අපි decide කරන්නේ by looking at the relative size of the substitution effect and the income effect, by looking at the relative size. Then මෙතන කියනවා if the income effect of a price change is negative but the substitution effect dominates. So the substitution effect, I mean for any good the substitution effect is negative, so this negative substitution effect dominates. It's much more higher than this negative income effect. So if the substitution effect dominates, then the good is definitely a typical inferior good, and as a result even the price effect will be negative. But when it comes to the given goods, what happens? ඔය දෙකම තමයි. කියන්නේ income effect is negative, even the substitution effect is negative. But the problem when it comes to given goods, the income effect dominates the substitution effect. And so the ultimate price effect will be positive. ඔක තමයි කතන්දරේ. ඉතින් එහෙනම් මොකද්ද මේකේ තියෙන answer එක? මේ දීලා තියෙන කතන්දර වලට if the substitution effect dominates, the good has to be just a typical inferior good. And our answer for this 11th one is the fourth one. Right, 12th. When a price ceiling is imposed in a market, right? When the price ceiling is imposed, very easy. Anyone can understand this. So a price ceiling, what is it? Price ceiling means a maximum price. So this is the supply, this is the demand, and the government has imposed a maximum price, right? Maximum price, if not the price ceiling. Then what will happen? The quantity demanded increases, but as a result of this maximum price, the quantity supplied decreases. which means in simple terms, in the market, there is an excess demand. Right? There is an excess demand in the market. Now, right, the first one says when a price ceiling is imposed in the market, a persistent shortage results. See, then a persistent shortage means again there's a demand, there's a higher demand compared to the supply. ඒ කියන්නේ සරලව ගත්තොත් තාමත් shortage of goods කියලා කියන්නේත් excess demand කියන එකම තමයි. So both are same synonyms. ඒ නිසා yes, this is the answer. එතකොට a persistent surplus results if a minimum price is imposed in the market. එතකොට මේකට ඒක අදාළ නැහැ. Sellers of the product are made better off. See that now, not the sellers. The maximum price is imposed in the market for the betterment of consumers. නිසා මේකේ පැත්ත මාරු වුණා නම් තමයි හරියන්නේ. And the fourth one, no one is made better off. No, the consumers will be better off. So මේකත් වැරදි එතකොට. Quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded. No, the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied. එහෙම වුණා නම් මේක හරියන්න තිබ්බා, but this given one is wrong. Right. 13th. Look at the 13th one. Right. Look at the 13th one. It says, which one of the following is not a problem associated with the imposition of effective price? Okay. So here they just talk about the price flow. කලින් තිබුණේ ceiling price, but this is a price flow. ඒ කියන්නේ අරකේ අනිත් පැත්ත. Which means, again, we have the supply curve, we get the demand curve, but this time what does the government do? They impose a minimum price. And if it is an effective minimum price, it has to be definitely a price greater than the equilibrium price. ඒවා සරල සිද්ධි ඉතින් හැමෝම දැනගෙන ඉන්න ඕන. එහෙනම් පළවෙනි එක මොකද්ද? Chronic excess supply in the market. Of course, if the minimum price is greater than the equilibrium price, the suppliers will be motivated so that the quantity supplied will be higher than the quantity demanded. So there will be an excess supply. එතකොට that is not the answer. මොකද අහන්නේ which one of the following is not a problem associated with this price flow. This is something that really happens as a result of price flow. Second one, the transfer of income from non-agricultural taxpayers to farmers. That's what the government needs to do. The government increases the prices of these agricultural goods by imposing this minimum price, and as a result there will be a cash flow from non-agricultural taxpayers to the farmers. So that is true then. The third one, large subsidies paid by the government. See, this is also something possible. Why? Because if the government tries to maintain this imposed minimum price through the price support policies, then there will be subsidies. Either they will purchase the excess supply, if not they will pay the deficiency, so that ඒවා අපිට subsidies වගේ ගන්න පුළුවන්. හැබැයි fourth මොකද කියන්නේ? A higher, so even this is true, higher price for consumers. මොකද the market price get increased. And the fifth one says the emergency of black markets for agricultural commodities. ඒ කියන්නේ price එක වැඩි කළාමත් black markets එහෙම එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. price එක අඩු කළාම නම් ඒක වෙනවා. මොකද price එක අඩු කළාම the quantity get limited. ඒ නිසා to acquire this limited quantity, the consumers may go for black markets. They will purchase the goods at a higher price than the price imposed by the government, and then there will be black markets. I think this is something that happens under maximum price policy, not under minimum price policy. So this is the answer, right? This is the answer. Question 13, fifth one is the answer. Right, look at this 14th one now. What does this say? It says a market demand function for a product sold in a competitive market is given by the equation QD equals 180 minus 2P. If the equilibrium price in the market is rupees 65, the value of consumer surplus is, okay, so these are like nothing. So the demand equation is given to you as 180 minus 2P, right? So demand equation is 180 minus 2p. If so, this is where we get 180, and then 180 divided by this 2 is 90, and this is where we get it. And the question tells us that this is the equilibrium price. And how much is that? That's just 65. Which region presents a consumer's surplus? That is the region below the demand curve, above the market price, up to the quantity traded in the market. So this region in blue color is the consumer surplus, right? And how do we find this region's area? That is simply half into, you write maximum demand price minus market price into market quantity. So it's half into maximum demand price is 90, market price here is 65 into market quantity. See, we have a little problem. We don't know that, but we can simply find it by assigning this value 65 to this P in this equation. So that will be 130, so that the answer will be 50. So the market quantity is 50. And how much is the value? It's half into 25 into 50. So simply 25 into 25, 25 squared is 625. Right? 625 is the answer. So 625 we have as the first option. Now 15th question. This says increasing returns to scale reflect a technological characteristic under which the percentage increase in a firm's output. Okay, so let me write it here in this way. Percentage increase, let's say percentage change in firm's output. So percentage change in output exceeds the percentage increase in its inputs, exceeds the percentage increase in inputs, 100% true. So if the percentage increase of output is greater than the percentage increase in inputs, that's what we recognize as increasing returns to scale. You just need to go through the note, right? So second one says the percentage increase of output is less than the percentage increase in inputs. Okay, so they just talk about the, I mean, in the second option, they talk about the opposite of this, right? So if it is simply the opposite of this thing, right? If it is the opposite of this thing, so then it is related to decreasing returns to scale, right? This is related to decreasing returns to scale. And the next one, percentage increase in firm's output is equal to the percentage increase in its input. So which means these two are equal. If so, it's about constant returns to scale, right? Constant returns to scale, right? So the first one is the answer because it talks about the increasing returns to scale, but we will go through the last two as well. Fourth one says exceeds the percentage increase in its fixed inputs and then is less than the percentage increase in its fixed inputs. See that now fixed inputs. See the question, main part of the question talks about increasing returns to scale. So returns to scale happen in the long run. And in the long run of a firm, we don't have anything called fixed inputs. So that both these answers are totally irrelevant to the long run. If not, they are irrelevant to the main part of the question. So they are not the answers there. Right. Look at this question 16. In question 16, it says, which of the following statements is correct? Economic profit is equal to accounting profit. See, if there's no implicit cost, of course, this could have been true, but under normal conditions, right, economic profit is always lower than the accounting profit. Second one says economic cost is equal to explicit cost plus implicit cost, 100% true. So this is the answer then. The third one says economic cost is equal to explicit cost minus implicit cost. No, the total of the two we recognize as the economic cost. Fourth one says opportunity cost equals economic profit. No, opportunity cost equals, what is it? Economic cost. That's the correct version. The fifth one, accounting cost equals implicit cost. No, accounting cost is equal to explicit cost. That's the correct version. But from the five, the Correct answer is the second one. Right, look at this 17th one. It says, which of the following is necessarily a characteristic of an oligopolistic market? So what is the example, the best example for this oligopolistic market? The best example is network providers. Network providers in Sri Lanka. Okay, so think about the network providers in Sri Lanka when you think about the correct answer. First one says pre-entry into and exit from the market. No, in that given industry, we have barriers to entry and barriers to exit. So that is not the answer then. Second one, a few large scale producers, 100% true. If you think about the network providers in Sri Lanka, we have few but still large scale producers. And that is one main quality. Third one, only one producer of a good with no close substitutes. This is about the monopoly. And the fourth one, homogeneous products. See, at times these oligopolistic firms can produce homogeneous products. හැබැයි අපි එක හරියටම කියන්නේ මෙන්න මෙහෙමයි. They either produce homogeneous products, if not differentiated products. So we can't be 100% certain on the nature of the product that they produce. ඒ නිසා දැන් ප්‍රශ්නය අපෙන් අහන්නේ which one of the following is necessarily a characteristic? So this may not be always true. So you can't take it there. The fifth one, no opportunities for pollution between firms. Make pollution between firms means the agreements between firms. Now we know that in oligopolistic markets, we have a strong interdependency among the firms. So there may be chances where they have different agreements between firms when it comes to their competition or maybe pricing related issues, right? They can have different agreements. So this one says there's no such opportunities to have agreements. No, it's wrong there. The next question, 18th one. If a firm faces a perfectly elastic demand curve for its product, right? Perfectly elastic demand curve, the firm faces, right? So this is the demand of a firm. Then this must be, I mean, this entire question must be with regard to perfect competition, right? Perfect competition, because only in the perfect competition, a firm has this perfectly elastic demand curve, right? So knowing that, if you read the 5 options given, you will be able to pick the correct answer. First one says that firm is not a price taker. No, a firm in the perfect competition is a price taker. So this is wrong then. Second one, firm is able to lower its price. Third one says firm is able to raise the price. No, if the firm becomes a price taker, they can't do any of this. Fourth one, firm's marginal revenue is horizontal at the market price. 100% true. If it's a firm in the perfect competition, and if this is their demand curve, මෙන්න මේ ඔක්කොම equal. Demand, ඊට පස්සේ price of the product, average revenue, marginal revenue, they all are equal. And if you draw the curves related to each one of these, there will be just one single curve, and that curve will be parallel to the quantity axis. ඒ නිසා this is 100% true. Fifth one says firm will always make zero economic profit. See, the problem with this statement is this one, always. But if it says in this way, the firm in the long run makes zero economic profit, that's 100% true. හැබැයි මෙතන කියන්නේ it always makes zero economic profit. එහෙම වෙන්නේ නැහැ, because in the short run, the firm may earn even supernormal profits or supernormal losses either, right? But in the long run, it's 100% sure that they always earn normal profits, if not zero economic profit. But that happens only in the long run. So in the short run, it's possible to earn any form of economic profit. So this is wrong there, right? 19th question, the difference between gross value of output and the gross value added. So before you look at this gross difference between the two, GVO and GVA, you just tell me how do we find this GVA? You take gross value of output, from that you deduct intermediary consumption. So if you know this very simple equation, what's the difference between these two, GVO and GVA? See, you simply send this one to this side so that you can send this IC minus IC to the other side, so it becomes plus. Then intermediary consumption is equal to the difference between GVO and GVA. And what's the answer? It's about intermediary consumption, right? So second one is the answer. 20th. In national accounting, which one of the following activities is excluded from the production boundary? That's what we use. I mean, we use this production boundary to decide whether we should include this thing into the calculation of national accounting or whether we should exclude this thing. These are like theoretical things, recognized, already recognized, very well recognized things. එනිසා ඔයාට ඒක චුට්ටක් මතක නම් you can find the answer. The answer is this: taking care of sick and elderly people. That is excluded in the calculation of national accounting according to the production boundary. And all the other provided options, right, have a value addition in the economy, so that they must be considered. According to the production boundary, this is the one that we exclude. Right, we will move to this question 21 now. It says, main components of primary income are. Okay, the problem is now this part has changed, right? So the answer of this paper will not be relevant to your A-level year. So I'm going to skip this question 21 since there's a new structure. Right, we'll move to this question 22 now. In 22, it says, if personal income exceeded national income in a particular year, it can be concluded that, okay, so wait, I'll first ask you the question, how do we find this personal income? We first take the, let's say, national income. In simple terms, we take the national income, and to this, we add all the receipts, right? Nathan, we can say that we add all the transfers to households, because transfers are not included inside the national income. So we need to add those transfers to households, and from this, we should deduct the components or the factor incomes that are not flown to the household. So I can write here factor income that do not flow to households. So when you deduct this thing, what's the output? Output is personal income, right? Output is personal income. Right, now according to the question, what has happened here? The personal income exceeds the national income. So if this value is this much, the personal income value is this much. So what does that mean? This added value, right, this added value has to be lower than the value that you have subtracted. ඒකනේ වෙන්න ඕනේ. එතකොටනේ ඔය කියන කතන්දරය වෙන්නේ. දැන් අපි exam එකකට values ටිකක් දාලා බැලුවොත්, if this is just 1000 and if you add 500 and if you deduct 100, what will be the output? Output will be 1400. So personal income is greater than the national income. And why is that? Because the reason, as I mentioned earlier, this added value is greater than the subtracted value. ඉතින් ඕක තමයි වෙන්න පුළුවන් එකම දේ. නිසා අපි කියවලා බලමු මොකක්ද ආන්සර් කියලා. Right, first one says, the amount of transfer payments exceeded. Okay, amount of transfer payments means the part that we added, right? The amount of transfer payments exceeded the sum of social security contributions, corporate income taxes, and undistributed corporate profits. So what are these? I mean, when we take the sum of social security contributions, corporate income taxes, and undistributed corporate profits, what are these? Those are the factor incomes that do not flow to households. එහෙනම් ඒ කියන කතන්දරේ හරිනේ. ඔයාට මේ ඔක්කොම ටික රිප්ලේස් කරන්න පුළුවන් නේ කාත් එක්කද? මේ ඔක්කොම ටික වලට replace කරන්න පුළුවන් මෙන්න මේ වචනෙත් එක්ක. Factor incomes that do not flow to households. So if this is lower than the transfer uh, payments to the households, obviously what will happen? Personal income will exceed the national income. So this is true then. So then no point of reading the other ones. මොකද ඕකේ අනිත් ඒවා කියන්නේ ඔය කතන්දර වල අනිත් පැත්ත ඉතින්. එතකොට ඔය කියන දේ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒකයි. එහෙනම් 23. Look at this 23. The diagram below displays an aggregate expenditure function for a hypothetical economy. Okay, so this is this 45-degree line. This is where we say aggregate income is same as the aggregate expenditure. And then by giving this, what do they ask? At the real output level of rupees 600 billion. Okay, when the real output is rupees 600 billion, there is, okay, see that now, when the real output is 600, the aggregate expenditure is lower than the aggregate income. Hope you all see that, because now you might say that, so this is not visible. I mean, this value is not visible. ඒක visible වෙන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. මොකද අපි ඒකට කියන්නේම that is the 45-degree line. If it is a 45-degree line, the scale of this axis, if it is same as the scale of this axis, they must be same when you draw these graphs, so that ඒක එහෙම නොකියුවත්, right, මෙතන තියෙන value එක වෙන්න ඕන කීයද? This has to be 600, right? එහෙනම් ඔයා බැලුවොත් එහෙම income, I mean y is 600, but when the income, when the y value is 600, how much is the e value? E value is only 450. And you all know that this aggregate income is somewhat same as the aggregate supply, and this aggregate expenditure is somewhat same as the aggregate demand. එතකොට අපිට තේරෙනවා මොකද්ද වෙලා තියෙන්නේ කියලා. මොකද්ද? Aggregate supply is greater than the aggregate demand. නිකන් හිතන්න in unit 2, if the supply exceeds the demand, ඔයා ඒකට මොකක් කියලාද කියන්නේ? ඔයා ඒකට කියනවා excess supply, right? You recognize that as excess supply. But in macroeconomic equilibrium lesson, this excess supply, this same concept, I mean, if aggregate supply increases the aggregate demand, if not, if aggregate income exceeds the aggregate expenditure, this is an unplanned inventory accumulation, right? So that's how you recognize this same thing in macroeconomic equilibrium lesson. There is an unplanned inventory accumulation in this economy, and how much is that? The difference is just 600 minus 450, which is 150. So the answer has to be an accumulation of unplanned stocks of rupees 150 billion. So third one is the answer. Right, then this 24th question, but before we move there, wait. Okay, we'll read this question 24 now. What does it say? In an economy with a positive output gap. Okay, if it is the positive output gap, let's say this is our potential output and this is our real output. So if you look at this situation here, the real output exceeds the potential output. So this gap we recognize to be the positive output gap, right? Positive output gap. And what happens during this, or what happens in a situation where we see this positive output gap? Or may lines වල දකිනවා වගේම, see this is the real output and this is the potential output, right? So what happens then when there is this positive output gap? Real output is greater than the potential output. Okay, තමයි කතන්දරේ, right? එතකොට that happens during an expansionary period, right? This happens during an expansionary period. So this part of this phase of the business cycle we recognize as an expansion. හරි. ඉතින් ඔය ටික ඔළුවේ තියාගෙන we will read the given answers. First one says, in an economy with a positive output gap, there is an unutilized productive capacity. නෑ. ඔයා ඒ කියන්නේ ඔයාගේ තියෙන productive capacity එක ටිකක් වැඩිපුරත් එක utilize කරලා තියෙනවා. එහෙම කතන්දරයක් මෙතන තියෙන. ඒකයි අපි කියන්නේ real output exceeds the potential output කියලා. ඒක හොඳටම කිව්වොත් in this situation the economy has utilized resources under full employment and under maximum intensity of utilization. ඔයා දැන් මේක වැරදිට තේරුම් ගන්න එපා. This is not about the full employment and full production, because if it is the full production it always talks about the normal intensity of resource utilization. දැන් normal intensity නෙමෙයි, ඊටත් වඩා වැඩියෙන් තමයි resources utilize කරන්නේ. ඉතින් ඒ නිසා there is no unutilized productive capacity. maximum එකටත් වඩා චුට්ටක් වැඩිපුර තමයි මෙතන ඇත්තටම production එක වෙන්නේ. ඒ නිසා this is not the answer. There's a cyclical unemployment. No, මම කිව්වත් එක මොකද්ද? If there's a positive output gap, the economy utilizes resources under full employment and under maximum intensity of utilization. And so there's no unemployment in this particular stage now. So that is also wrong. Actual output is less than the potential output. No, the actual output, if not the real output, exceeds the potential output. So this is again wrong then. Opposite is true. Fourth one, there is a slowdown in the pace of economic. No, there's an acceleration, not a slowdown, right? So this is false again. Fifth one says there could be demand pull inflation pressure in the economy. 100% true. That's why I told you that this exists in the expansionary phase. So during this expansionary phase, what could happen? The demand pull inflation may arise in the economy. So that is true then. Right, 25th one. If the aggregate savings function for an economy is S equals minus 200 plus 0.25 into Y, then the aggregate consumption function of this given economy is very easy. So if මේවත් ඇත්තටම ඕනි කෙනෙකුට පුළුවන් දේවල් වගේ තමයි අර economics වල තියෙන. ඒ නිසා if savings function is as minus 200 plus 0.25 into Y, what's the consumption function? That will be plus 200 plus, again, plus නිසා එක ලියලා වැඩකුත් නැතරම. So simply 200 plus 1 minus this value, which is 0.75 into Y. So this is the consumption function in the economy. So first one is obviously the answer.